Welcome to this talk. This is the book story. Uh, Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in the Philippines. Uh, as publishers, I think we always want to listen to a good book story. Uh, and almost exactly a year ago, October 17, this book, Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in my country, was released in New York by Random House. Um, okay. And it quickly became the New York Times 10 Best Books of 2023, a New Yorker's and the Economist's Best Book of the Year, and Time Magazine's #1 nonfiction book. And it is in its 100 must-read books for 2023. It was also longlisted for the 2024 Women's Prize for Nonfiction, and it won the 2024 Helen Bernstein Book Award for Excellence in Journalism, besting 109 other books from other countries. More recently, it was longlisted for the Moore Prize for Human Rights. Back home, it outsold any other imported title in hardcover edition. The book covers Rappler journalist Patricia Evangelista 6 years of reporting on the drug war of our former President Rodrigo Duterte. When asked about being a trauma journalist, she says in the book, and I quote, "My job is to go to places where people die. I pack my bags, talk to the survivors, write my stories, then go home to wait for the next catastrophe. I don't wait very long," close quotes. Patricia came to national fame at age 18. She was still a student at the University of the Philippines as the first Filipino to win the London-based annual international public speaking championships. She went on to become a prize-winning multimedia journalist. Not working. Hello. Okay. Thank you. Okay, she went on to become a prize-winning multimedia journalist. She was an opinion page columnist for 9 years. And as an aside, I almost published her own selection of her best column pieces. And she became a television producer. She was the producer of The Storyline, the famous show which introduced a new interview format back in the Philippines, where the subject is the camera focuses only on the subject and the questions are just heard. No? So it really makes the subject the most important person and not the interviewer. She also produced a 3-part investigative documentary on abortion, disaster, and human rights. She's a fellow of the Southeast Asian Press Alliance, a Titus Brandsma awardee for emergent journalism, won 3 New York Festivals medals, and the 2014 Kate Webb Prize for Frontline Journalism. Then she joined Rappler as a field reporter, writing long-form journalism pieces. It was clear to her Rappler bosses that after she filed all those reports on the drug-related cases, it was no longer safe for her to stay. So she left in 2018 for the Logan Fellowship in Albany, New York, and started to write, this time for a book. It required tedious back research, going back to the stories to verify facts, and giving every single one its proper context. Writing a book demands that, unlike daily breaking news. Writing this book meant going back to the loved ones left behind by the killed. And that took so much more to deal with the grief, the trauma, and loss of faith in a system, in a country despite everything they still loved until they couldn't anymore. It took her another 4 years to finalize a draft. Patricia was born in the year before our EDSA People Power, the peaceful revolution that won for our country a restoration of democracy and a new future. But 30 years after, as the gap between rich and poor grew sharper, and in such mounting inequality, we are back to where we were. We realized how fragile our democratic institutions are, like potty in the hands of strong men like former President Rodrigo Duterte. This small, fragile-looking journalist, and a woman at that, as most male reporters said of her being always at a crime scene, this young woman is formidable in this book, with the book, and by the book. Her accounts of a world of killers and survivors are so meticulously true and painful. The terror is equally detailed when it becomes official and legal that some lives are better than others. David Remnick of The New Yorker calls the book a journalistic masterpiece. Others refer to it as a brilliant grammar of violence, a profound act of witness, a compelling examination of the consequences of populist rhetoric and the myth of violence as a redemptive force. Anne Applebaum calls it a haunting work of memoir and reportage. So here with us today to give her own account of how this book came to be is the author herself, Patricia Evangelista. Boska. Do you need the smell? No. Back up.
Hello. How about I tell you a story, yeah? In 2016, the mayor of a southern city in the Philippines ran for the presidency. His name is Rodrigo Duterte. Duterte told a story. He took every fear and every grievance, fueled by decades of failed expectations, and then he gave the enemy a name. He called it the scourge of illegal drugs. He said drugs were responsible for the shambles the Philippines was in. He said addicts were heartless and mindless, willing to butcher their fathers and rape their sisters, and so bestial and bizarre that they would fuck a goat if a goat were all they had to fuck. The enemy was legion, he said. 3 million, 4 million, 5. And if you didn't believe him, he said he would give you the drugs himself. Feed it to your children. Watch them become monsters. In the story Rodrigo Duterte told, Duterte had your back. He said the struggle ended here, today. Fuck the bleeding hearts, to hell with bureaucracy, there is no forgiveness, there are no second chances, a line would be drawn. And Rodrigo Duterte would stand on the other side with a loaded gun. Here was a man who said what he meant and meant what he said, who would give you a warning, then count 1, 2, 3. In the hands of any other man, any other president, the story might have stayed a story. But this is Rodrigo Duterte, the Punisher from the South, under whose watch reportedly hundreds were slaughtered by death squads he had organized himself. He could promise death because he said he had done it himself. In his city, he said he had found a rapist. I killed the son of a bitch, he said. I killed him without pity. Why should I feel pity? Pity is not one of my virtues. He not only told the story, he was the story. He embodied it. Here was a man who was different, who could do things, but who carried the same rage as everyone else. I am one of you, he said. I'm no one special, he said. I'm just an ordinary killer. Rodrigo Duterte became every man, so that every man could be Rodrigo Duterte. Now, how? How do you put a story on trial? Once upon a time, because that's the only way stories should begin, once upon a time, there was a little girl named Lady Love. She was 11 years old, small for her age, all skinny brown legs and big dark eyes. Nobody called her Lady, everyone called her Love Love, and only her father called her Love, just Love. Love, he would say, give your daddy a hug. Love Love lived with her mother and her father and her many little siblings on the second floor of a shanty. Then one night, late in the night, two men burst through a door where she slept with her parents. One of them stood over Love Love's father. Positive, he said. Positive, he meant. Positive for being on the list of drug use or drug dealing, allegedly. So Love Love's father tried to get up, but there was a baby asleep on his chest, so he fell back down again. Then he turned his head and he said one word, the last word he would ever say. He turned his head and he said, love. Right before the bullet cracked through his left temple. The baby wailed. Love Love's mother wept. But it was Love Love who thrust herself between the gunman and her mother. And it was Love Love who stood with the barrel of a gun just inches from her forehead. And it was Love Love, all skinny brown legs and big dark eyes, who swore at the gunman and told him to kill her instead. Shoot me, she said, not my ma. So the gunmen left, but they weren't gone for long. When they returned, one of the gunmen stood in front of Love Love's mother, raised his gun, and said, Duterte kami. We are Duterte, said the gunman with a mask. Love Love's mother died on her knees. We are Duterte, said the gunman with a mask. I guess this is an appropriate time to introduce myself. My name is Pat. I was born in 1985, 5 months before a street revolution that brought democracy back to the Philippines. My surname, Evangelista, which is common in my country, means bringer of good news. It is an irony I am informed of often. I'm a trauma reporter. As Karina says, it means I go to places where people die. I pack my bags, charge my cameras, interview the survivors, investigate the causes, file my stories, then go home to wait for the next catastrophe. I don't wait very long. But I can tell you about those places. There have been many of them in the last decade. They're the coastal villages after typhoons where babies are zipped into backpacks because the body bags have run out. There are the hillsides in the south where 58 people, including 32 journalists, were massacred then buried in a layer cake of cars and corpses. There are the safe houses in cities like mine, where young girls speak softly about being stripped naked as white men watch from the other side of the world. There are the cornfields in rebel countries, the shanty towns during demolitions, the courtrooms where generals lie about torture and murder. I am a journalist of 15 years standing. I do not traffic in hope. I wrote about terrible things that happened because those things shouldn't have happened and shouldn't happen again. And then one day, the man who would become the president of the Philippines promised the deaths of his own citizens. The terrible became ordinary to thundering applause. There were corpses every night at the height of the killings, 7, 19, 24. The paragraphs reduced to sentences. We were covering body after body, crime scene after crime scene, and the language failed as the body count rose. There are no synonyms for blood or bleed. The blood doesn't gush by the time I walk into a crime scene. It doesn't burble or spurt. It sits in pools under doorways, or, in the case of a man we found in front of a convenience store, spills out of the mouth in rivulets. I was part of a group we called the Night Shift. Photographers, reporters, video journalists from different news agencies from all over the country, and we covered crime scenes after crime scene. And while it is an honor to work with the best and bravest of Philippine journalism, there were many crime scenes, and there weren't enough of us. So to survive, you have to come up with your own methodology. I asked the same questions every night. Was it a drive-by? Was it a salvaging? Was it a body dump? Was the killer a cop or a vigilante? Were the hands bound? Was the head wrapped in packing tape? Was the body stuffed into a bag? Was there a sign by the body? Was there a gun on the ground? You go through it like a checklist. Verify the street corner, find the investigating officer, sidle up to the bystanders, find out if they know the dead man's name. But there was one thing I learned during the drug war that I never learned in the years of covering conflict and disaster. I learned how to stand still and listen for the screaming, because that's when you find out where the family is. So you walk softly, you apologize, condole, keep your voice low, keep your questions simple. What was his name? Where was he born? When did you see him last? How did you know he was gone? And the methodology is important because it kept me grounded in the scene, and it also meant there's very little probability you'll miss anything. And I had to test for it right before I walked into the car. If I could close my eyes and see the room or the highway or the alleyway in 360 degrees, if I knew that the blood on the ground was the consistency of tomato ketchup, if I knew that the cop wiped the blood off his hands with his shirt instead of a rag, if I knew that the sign left in the back pocket of the dead man folded 4 times calling him a drug addict was in Times New Roman size 12 all caps, if I knew that the bullet cracked through the right temple instead of the left, or that the gunman walked away instead of ran, if I knew the color of the shoe, the tenor of the scream, the fact that the dead man was wearing red and white bikinis when they stripped him on the street, that's when I knew I could go home, because I would take the story home with me. I cannot write about what I cannot see, and I cannot make you see what I cannot imagine myself. Early in the drug war, we already understood the rumors that the cops were outsourcing murder to vigilantes. I found the vigilantes. I spoke to some of them. I'll tell you about one. I can't give you his real name, but I call him Simon. He calls himself a religious man. He calls himself a good man. He has a wife, he has children, and he has a gun. I was afraid of killing at first, Simon told me. But it's like drugs. First you're addicted, and then you're okay. In the story Simon told, his group of vigilantes killed at least 20 people in the span of 7 months. Simon killed 2. By kill, it meant he pulled the trigger, but he was part of other operations in other capacities. He drove the getaway van, he conducted surveillance. There was nothing Simon was unwilling to do for what he called the job, because success at the job meant one less addict threatening the future of his children. I'm not a bad guy, Simon told me. I'm not all bad. It's just some people need killing. I was supposed to interview Simon for 2 more hours, but he said he had to go. He had a job, he said, and he didn't want to be late. I'm going to read you a very little bit from the book, and I promise to keep it short. There is no blood on the scene. The body had been abandoned at the high point of the bridge in the shadow of the cement parapet. He is a big man with big bare feet. He wears red basketball shorts and a sleeveless blue and white jersey. Truck headlights play over the plastic tape wrapped around his head like a helmet. Someone had scrawled on the brown cardboard sign left beside him, "Drug pusher. Do not imitate." Camera lights flash. A radio reporter barks a dispatch. 10-wheeler delivery trucks rumble past the crowd of onlookers. The dead man lies perfectly symmetrical, flush against the wall, the still center of the roaring circus that is a Manila crime scene. I am kneeling just outside the yellow tape when I hear her scream. It is a wordless, keening cry. I see her face first, pale in the distance, blue and red police lights shooting off her hair. She comes running from the bottom of the bridge before flinging herself to the pavement beside me. "Please, let me touch him," she begs the cops. "Why won't you let me touch him?" Her name is Ivy. She says the dead man is her husband. His name is Rene. She knows him by his feet. The investigator tries to cut through the packing tape mask. The scissors break. He takes out a cutter. The blade slices from the edge of an ear and traces the line of jaw and chin and cheek until it reaches the other ear. The face underneath is slack and damp. A thin dark line runs over his neck. Rene Desierto had been stabbed 19 times. Cause of death was recorded as asphyxiation by ligature. He had been garroted. His death is an execution. Many things have happened in the years since he died. Ivy lost her job. She tried to cut open her wrist twice. Occasionally, she wrapped her head in packing tape, in imitation of her dead husband. She said she wanted to know how it felt. There were days when she believed his death was her fault. She has many reasons. If she had run up the bridge faster, she might have pumped his chest in time. If she had never filed a missing persons report, his killers might have let him live. The last of the reasons comes from their young son. Once, during an argument, Ivy had told Rene she wished he were dead. Their boy remembered. "It's your fault," her son told her. "You wanted Daddy to die." "I'm writing a book," I tell Ivy. "Tell them our story," she said. I see Ivy every few months. I carry a box of chicken for her son, sometimes donuts. She sets an ashtray on the plastic placemat. I push my pack of cigarettes across, along with my recorder. We light up before I press the button. "We're on the record," I say. "Thank you for your time."
Still there? Here's the mic.
We will have a Q&A later, but we'll have a short conversation first. Pat, I know we shouldn't maybe keep it political, but that's going to be very hard to do. But this is a book story, so we're more interested in how it became a book and crossed oceans and published by Random House, came back to become also a bestseller in the Philippines. How was it? When did you know it was going to be a book?
I didn't want to write a book. I had to leave the Philippines for a time. It wasn't the safest place for me. My agent took the first few pages of a proposal, and then he got it together. And then it felt like speed dating. I met, I think, 9 different houses. I was very concerned if I was attired properly. I asked my agent how I was supposed to dress. He said, "I don't know, maybe black." And I asked if I was supposed to dress like the Matrix or Audrey Hepburn. I went for Hepburn and then I landed Random House, so maybe that was a good call. Um, And then it started there. I quit my job because I couldn't do daily reporting while writing this book. And I reported the war 6 years. I wrote the book 4 years. Fact checking was maybe 6 months, something like 3, 6 months. And then I'm here. It's been a year. It's kind of shocking. So, hello.
How did you find your agent? Because in the Philippines, we don't have literary agents. The authors go directly to publishers, and there's some kind of relation. It's a different kind of relationship between publishers and authors.
I used to write for Esquire in the Philippines, and when 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 I was writing for Rappler, I was doing investigative work. Um, Rappler is a very small news agency. My boss won the Nobel a few years ago, but it doesn't mean we got more money out of it. So it's a small house, and by the time I was writing the investigative pieces, I was obsessive, I was paranoid, and we couldn't afford the fact checking or the editors. So I wrote to my Esquire editor-in-chief. I said if someone could edit my work, like a second eye. And he said, did I mind if it was a foreigner? And I said no, as long as it wasn't a Filipino, because I was at risk at the moment. And it came back with a line edit from David Granger, who was the editor-in-chief of Esquire at that time, had just retired, and then became an agent. And then he said, you should write a book. And I said no. And then eventually we had the book.
You you did a lot of I mean more than the usual book tours, I think, no? Not just in the United States, but even in other countries, Scotland, Spain. Uh, of course, I would know the answer to this question, how it would compare to your book tour in the Philippines, because you also went to different universities in Manila, Baguio, even in Davao. And a copy of your book was given to Rodrigo Duterte, but this was after he was no longer president. No? But how would you compare? Was there something different between touring it abroad to an international crowd and in the Philippines?
I think it was around 6, 8 months after I launched the book before I went home, finally. There were some security concerns, but for him to be president. Not quite. But there were some concerns. But I think for a 1 month period, I did something like 27 engagements across the Philippines. But the first event was in a Catholic church. I am a recovering Catholic. I have quite thoroughly recovered, but the church was the best sanctuary for the victims of the war. So the first people who were given copies of the book were the people in the book and their families and their loved ones. And Random House was fantastic. They gave away the hardbound copies to the families of the people who were lost. And it was my first book signing in my country. And there were people who would go up to me and say, can you sign it in the name of my husband and my son? And then they would tell me that their husband and their son are dead, that they had died in the war, but by signing it in their name, it means they're still fighting. And Love, the young girl I told you about, she was 18. She showed up and she hugged me from behind and she said, I'm so proud of you, Ate Pat. So while I am incredibly honored to sit in places like this, to bring the book home, sort of like going back to your parents and said, did I fuck up? And maybe I did and maybe I didn't, but I am glad to have told the story, if nothing else, to have kept the record.
The language was not a problem. It's in English.
We hope to have a Filipino translation soon.
Okay, that's great. The Random House gave you rights to a Filipino edition. That's something. Okay. Uh, I would like to open the floor to questions if the audience has questions. Yes. Can you can you say your name? You're one of the grantees.
Hi, Pat. I'm Chino Sena from the Philippines as well. I asked this question to Paula Yu, who wrote about the elite uprising of Asians. in the US, because it's also the same key. I'd like to think that when you write as authors, it's also our opportunity to develop as character. So when you wrote the poem, what was your character development?
You mean that I become a better human being?
Because your characters are actual people.
I don't know if I'm a better person. I'm certainly less sane than when I started. Um, I didn't want to write the book in the first person. Certainly, the first draft of the book was in third person, but Random House in its wisdom said a book this grim would require a character to pull the audience through because it's too grim. So character development. I used to smoke 4 packs a day. I'm on 2. But in all seriousness, um, you don't cover something like this and come off normal, I think, or what you were before. So you don't pretend you are. You learn how to negotiate your expectations. You don't think that when you write a book or tell a story, the world will change. You just think you told the story and it's there for when it matters. So I learned how to negotiate my expectations. I also learned that it matters to have a tribe. People who don't ask you why you do it, who like your cigarette and go watch the next body the next day. Guess that's it.
Yes.
So it's kind of related to what he asked. I actually wanted to ask you how you decompress, and you decompress and you give the Steve compressor every site you go to, and after writing the book, because knowing all these things, there is no stuff, it has to get to you. So aside from smoking, what did you do to take care of yourself?
With writing. A lot of whiskey. Yes. And also, it is proper to say it, in one of the grandest book fairs in the world, I read a lot. I don't read books with sad endings. I read a lot of romantasy. A lot of happy endings. I check online if the dog is going to die, if they live happily ever after, and if someone's valet is going to be shot on the way to saving the world. Lots of galaxies against galaxies and good against evil. I operate in a universe where bad things happen. So I am grateful for literature to give me a way up.
Any more questions?
Yes, if I may.
Yeah.
Thank you for your book and thank you for your presentation. You just spoke about your personal transformation writing the book. And I'm curious about the professional transformation in the Philippines for journalists. What was you saw journalists go in and out of this whole experience together. Tell us about how it's transformed journalism in the Philippines.
Well, I don't know about it transforming journalism. The Philippine journalism is female. I've never had a male boss, actually. So
Walker is all women.
it's not because we try to make it female, it just seems like we're good at our jobs. And my old company actually tried for affirmative action for men. It didn't work. But what I can tell you about the drug war and the night shift, we didn't leave anyone behind. We came from different institutions, different agencies. There were locals, there were foreigners, and there are good journalists and bad journalists. But in the end, it was the community that mattered. If I had the spot report for something, someone else can ask me for that. There were too many dead and too few of us. And I think that same community stands long after that. The Philippines isn't the safest place for journalism. It's one of the top 10s we're always in. So it matters to have a tribe and a community that stands up for each other. And I am grateful to be part of that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
microphone. Thank you so much for that talk. You will have another talk tomorrow, so I'll make sure that I will not repeat anything of what you talked today. Yes. I am just curious as to the label of trauma journalism, because for the country and for citizens like me, it was probably the most traumatic 6 years ever. And I don't know actually if I am out or if many of the people are out of that dark period. And for the little that I know of trauma, it does exist in you. And no matter how much you got on, let's say 20, 30 years, it still is within you. Now, I am just wondering, what else can top this kind of story? I mean, you have the book, some people need killing. And so what's next? I mean, for what? For you.
If the question is what sort of story can top the wholesale murder of, the wholesale killing of civilians, I don't think stories are about topping one or the other. If you cover the drug war, if one person died or if 27,000 died, for the mother who lost her son, the world ended. So it doesn't matter there are thousands. So I don't look at stories that way. Am I writing another book? I can't imagine going through that hell again. Um, People say that every journalist has a book in them. Mine came out of me kicking and screaming. And I think the only time I'll ever write a book again is if, like in this book, I didn't own the story owned me, still owns me every day. So I'm going to keep covering this one. But the Philippines, the Philippines will be traumatized for a very long time. It will be generations of children who saw the dead on the street, who are the children of victims or the children of killers themselves, or who are the same children who sat at home after school watching dead body after dead body at, at evening television. So there's always a story to cover. I just wish there weren't all the time.
But you're on to another story, right? I mean, you don't have to say what it is about, but there has to be another story, right?
I cannot confirm or deny that.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes. If you want this. Right.
Okay, hello. My name is I'm from Brazil. I think Brazil and Philippines share a lot of similarities. Here in Brazil, in one of largest cities, Rio de Janeiro, we have the bulk of extremely political culture that was is the year because it is a truth storage that goes hand in hand with Neo-Pentecostalism, which is the Protestant side. We have a such located of Havela College, Uprak such as Hayo, which is like this name is very ironic, which attacks races who follow religions of African region, for example. And I believe both Brazil and Philippines share many cultural similarities and offer narrative historical exegesis or genocidal precedents. How do you think Christianity connected totalitarian regimes, the formation of militias, and domination of the population?
Sorry, can you repeat the part that's a question?
Leo's question, how do you think Christianity connected totalitarian regimes, the formation of militias, and domination of the population?
Christian, the religion, Christianity.
Am I getting the question right? How does Christianity relate to the creation of militias and totalitarianism?
What's the connection? Right?
I don't think it's Christianity. The same thing way I don't think it's Judaism or it's being Muslim. I think there are charismatic men all over the world who will say terrible things and then will be applauded for what they say because sometimes it's what people want to hear. And then the dial turns a little bit. And then sometimes they might say make the country great again. Sometimes they might say take back the burger. Sometimes they might say kill all the drug addicts. Any belief can bring down the sky as long as the people believe. So I think our job is to resist when resistance is possible. Very good. Can I use help?
Not yet.
How was the revision process? It's not working. How was the revision? Did they how many drafts did you have to go through?
The new draft every day. Fact checking went side by side with revision. So your publishing house does the editing. I had a phenomenal editor, extraordinary team in Random House. And I signed a 1 year contract and I came out with a book 4 years later. So you can imagine how patient they are. But the fact checking process was pretty brutal as well. Most authors will run their own fact checking processes, not the publishing houses. So I put together a team of 7. And then I divided the chapters of the book across them. And the rule I gave was for every phrase in the book, assume I'm lying. Do not trust what I say and break every sentence. If it's not broken, then we're good. But if we are, I'd rather be wrong now. So then we went through translation too because Rodrigo Duterte likes to say putang ina a lot. And in translation, that's anything from motherfucker to goddamn to shit. So, or son of a bitch. So the fact checking included the nuancing of even translating son of a bitch. So that took a long time.
Yeah. Very thorough. Yeah. Any more questions? We shouldn't let her smoke.
For shame.
This to a question from the. I'm a scholar, but I'm a scholar. I get more copies. I've been living here in Germany for more than 2 years. I recently started reading your book, which is really good. I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for writing it. Um, so memoirs are really significant medium from women to tell their traumatic experiences, which is not per se a negative thing because it's more about giving women the agency to put forward their survival and resilience. What I'm curious about is, do you think you've said everything you wanted to say transparently, openly, and uncensored? I mean, have you felt censored yourself? Way, because given in today's climate, where a lot of social, political things are actually happening. I mean, even me, sometimes I do feel censored. Uh, in university, also personally, it's just like sometimes you can talk about what's happening right now. For example, in Gaza, in Palestinian, and it comes to the Philippines, there are also like a lot of things where you feel like, okay, are you allowed to say it, or should I say it? Even though it's actually, it's part of the discourse, the conversation. So, yeah.
Self-censorship.
The climate in the Philippines tends to be occasionally violent to journalists. So, and the libel, for example, is also a criminal charge in the Philippines. So while I do not feel censored, the awareness of that requires self-censorship. The book needs to be bulletproof. I occasionally am concerned about security. I was far more concerned actually with the security of the people who spoke to me. Most of the people in the book are named. They chose to be named. So there is no way I can protect them in the aftermath. So there are things I did not say because I felt it would put them at greater risk, even if they didn't ask me not to say it. So all those levels of censorship are required from me because I have many concerns that I have to consider beyond just writing a good sentence. Do I wish I had censored myself more? Yeah, there are sentences there that are crap, so I wish I could have done some stuff better. But buy the book anyway.
Okay. Okay. I think you will have different issues when it gets translated to Filipino. And it will be another tedious process. But that's all the time we have. We thank you, Pat, for writing this book, which really now is a very valuable document. It's not just a book, I think. So, and thank you for sharing it with us here today. I don't know if the book is available anywhere here. Maybe in a English bookstore in German here in Frankfurt.
I am pleased to say that we've sold rights to a German translation here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. That's Kultur Verlag. Yeah. It's going to translate the book to German. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.